Tonight we slip quietly through the heat-hazed streets of ancient Egypt. You can almost feel the dust clinging to your skin, the sharp salt tang of the nearby Mediterranean on your lips, and the low murmur of priests chanting in forgotten tongues somewhere in the distance. But wait, this isn't the Egypt you know from documentaries with pyramid montages and soothing orchestral music. No, tonight, you're stepping into the version where Roman emperors, those corrupt, power-hungry icons of the West, decided they could also be pharaohs. And honestly, you probably won't survive this politically awkward, culturally bizarre, and experience. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is. There, drop it in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through Alexandria's bustling streets, sandaled feet kicking up pale dust as traders shout in a dozen different languages. Greek philosophers, Egyptian priests, Roman soldiers, they all brush past you, woven into the chaotic fabric of this hybrid empire. But everyone's eyes, yours included, keep drifting toward the towering marble palace looming at the city's heart. That, right there, is where the Roman emperors turned pharaohs now claim their throne. It feels off. See, being a pharaoh used to mean you were chosen by the gods themselves. You weren't just a king, you were divine. The living Horus, the earthly avatar of Ra. Your face was carved into temple walls, your name etched beside hieroglyphs, older than Rome itself. Egyptians believed pharaohs could command floods, guard the afterlife, and cozy up to crocodile-headed deities without blinking. But now Egypt's rulers sit thousands of miles away in marble palaces, wrapped in purple togas, sipping wine and plotting Senate betrayals. And yet, they insist on calling themselves pharaohs. It's like watching your least favorite politician suddenly try to cosplay as a god and expect everyone to clap. The weirdness of it all started after Cleopatra VII, the last of the great Ptolemies, made her final, fatal gamble. But we'll get there soon. First, you need to understand why this situation is so disturbing. The Romans didn't just conquer Egypt like they conquered Gaul or Judea. No, Egypt was different. It wasn't just a province, it was a treasure trove of grain, gold, and gods so ancient they made Jupiter look like a toddler. The Roman emperors, especially Augustus, were so obsessed with keeping Egypt under their thumb that they refused to let even Roman senators set foot there without permission. Egypt was the emperor's playground and also his paranoid fortress. As you walk along Alexandria's wide, sun-bleached avenues, you notice temples rising like jagged teeth against the skyline. Obelisks, sphinxes, faded statues of animal-headed gods, and tucked between them, new carvings of Roman emperors, awkwardly dressed in pharaoh garb. There's Augustus, stern and marble-chinned, staring out from temple walls like he's been Egyptian royalty all his life. But his carefully chiseled features can't hide the truth. He's an outsider playing a role older than his entire empire. Historians still argue whether this Roman pharaoh hybrid act was taken seriously by the Egyptians themselves, or whether they just smiled politely and kept their real opinions quiet. But the temples kept getting built, the priests kept chanting, and the pharaoh's name, now belonging to some Roman in Italy, kept getting etched into sacred monuments. It's like watching two worlds collide, one steeped in hieroglyphs, jackal-headed gods, and divine kingship, the other dripping with senatorial conspiracies, imperial propaganda, and marble ambition. The result, a fascinating, uncomfortable, and honestly, pretty disturbing blend of cultures, where emperors play God, priests play along, and everyone else just tries to survive. You pass by a street vendor, hawking amulets, tiny gold scarabs, and Eye of Horus charms dangling from worn cords. They promise protection from evil spirits, curses, and even the emperor's tax collectors. You're not sure which is scarier. A group of Roman soldiers marches past, shields gleaming under the desert sun. They look unimpressed by the ancient grandeur surrounding them, temples, statues, the weight of thousands of years pressing down on every stone. But you can feel it, that eerie sense that Egypt remembers, Egypt watches. Somewhere nearby, a priest lights incense inside a temple, thick, heady smoke curling into the air like ghostly tendrils. The statue towering within half-man, down with stone eyes as worshippers bow. You wonder what that ancient god thinks of Rome's new pharaohs. Probably not much. And yet, Rome keeps insisting. Every emperor after Augustus inherits the title. They stamp their faces onto coins with hieroglyphs. They parade around temples when visiting Egypt, wrapped in linen robes, stiff and uncomfortable. Under the desert heat, they command loyalty not just from soldiers, but from the ancient spirits of this land. Or at least, they try. You stroll toward the great harbor, the sea glittering like molten glass. Massive ships, laden with Egyptian grain creak and sway at anchor. Rome's belly depends on this place. The emperors know it. The Egyptians know it. It's part of why Augustus treated Egypt less like a province and more like a private vault. His own personal treasury. His own divine inheritance. The seagulls cry overhead. The salt air clings to your skin. Somewhere, beyond the endless dunes and temple ruins, the Nile winds its ancient path, carrying whispers of forgotten pharaohs and the disturbing truth that, no matter how far Rome reaches, Egypt never really belongs to them. You make your way through the bustling alleys of Alexandria, the sun hanging low and heavy over the rooftops, turning the limestone buildings into blocks of warm gold. The harbor glistens behind you, but your footsteps take you inland, toward the stories the city doesn't proudly display. Because for all the grandeur, the towering obelisks, the polished marble statues of emperors awkwardly dressed as pharaohs, the real turning point, the reason Rome even holds this strange, unwanted crown, starts with one woman, Cleopatra VII, and tonight, you're standing at the edge of her final gamble. The alley smells of seaweed and smoke. Fishermen haul in their catches, and vendors shout over one another, selling olives, bread, and the occasional dubious-looking meat skewer. But tucked away, past the crowds and the chatter, is the royal quarter, the beating, secretive heart of Cleopatra's Alexandria. That it's not all gold and perfumes like the plays make it seem. Sure, the palace gleams under the relentless sun, courtyards filled with exotic birds, polished mosaics, and fountains spraying cool, clean water. But behind the silks and the incense, you can feel it, the tension, the desperation, the gnawing anxiety that time is running out. You drift past courtiers whispering in hushed Greek and Egyptian, past Roman envoys glaring over goblets of imported wine. Cleopatra's charm still hangs in the air, but so does something sharper: fear. This isn't the glamorous, storybook Cleopatra of Hollywood. You won't find elaborate eyeliner tutorials or sensuous boat rides tonight. No, the real Cleopatra is many things: brilliant, ruthless, calculating, and completely cornered. She's the last of the Ptolemies, a Greek dynasty ruling Egypt since Alexander the Great bulldozed his way through history. For nearly 300 years, her family played the role of Egyptian pharaohs, sometimes convincingly, sometimes not, but they never forgot they were outsiders. And the Egyptians, they never really forgot either. Now, Cleopatra's legacy, Egypt's independence, and frankly her own neck, all hang by a thread. Historians still argue whether her relationship with Julius Caesar was love, political genius, or pure survival instinct. What's clear is that, after Caesar's assassination, the situation spiraled. Fast. Mark Antony, the ambitious, swaggering Roman general, became Cleopatra's last, best hope. Their alliance wasn't just romantic, it was strategic. Together, they controlled vast resources, armies, and the ancient prestige of Egypt. But back in Rome, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, and future Augustus, sharpened his knives. The propaganda painted Cleopatra as a seductive, foreign menace, an Eastern queen bewitching noble Roman men, threatening the Republic's proud, masculine virtue. It wasn't subtle. Cleopatra became the ultimate scapegoat. Egypt the exotic, dangerous prize, and the title of pharaoh tangled in the fallout. You lean against a cool marble pillar, eavesdropping on the frantic buzz inside the palace. Scrolls arrive with news from Rome, whispers of Octavian's armies growing stronger. Egyptian officials argue in urgent tones. Cleopatra, she stays poised, calculating, but her eyes sharp as a falcon's betray the truth. She knows the walls are closing in. Out in the harbors, Antony's ships bob like restless shadows. His legions stand ready, but their loyalty is frayed, stretched thin by months of siege, betrayal, and Roman politics turning toxic. The Battle of Actium, the disastrous naval clash that seals their fate, is still fresh in everyone's memory. Octavian's forces crushed them, their fleets scattered like broken pottery across the Mediterranean. Now Antony and Cleopatra retreat to Alexandria, their last stronghold, their last gamble. You pace along the palace gardens, past lotus ponds, and wilting flowers. The sun burns hotter now. Even the breeze feels exhausted. It's as if the entire city is holding its breath. Some say Cleopatra stockpiled treasures deep within the palace, walls ancient gold, priceless gems, relics older than Rome itself. A final contingency, should everything fall apart. Others claim she prepared something far older and far darker, ancient Egyptian rites, whispered spells, even poison tucked beneath silk cushions. Historians still argue about the details of a death: a asp bite, the poisoned comb, or something far more mundane. But one thing is certain: Cleopatra would never march in chains through the streets of Rome, paraded as a defeated curiosity for Octavian's triumph. You find yourself beneath the cool shadows of the temple columns, staring up at carved hieroglyphs, older than Julius Caesar, older than the Republic itself. Images of pharaohs, the real ones, immortalized in stone, commanding the Nile, offering to the gods, radiating divine authority. And yet, that world is ending. When Cleopatra dies, whether by snake, poison, or dagger, the last thread tying Egypt's native royalty to its ancient gods snaps. Octavian, triumphant and calculating, doesn't just conquer Egypt, he absorbs it. You can almost hear his voice echoing across the Mediterranean. Egypt belongs to me now. And so it does. But not like Gaul, not like Spain or Judea. Egypt becomes Octavian's private possession, a personal fiefdom, rich with grain, gold, and mysticism. The Senate isn't invited. Roman governors follow his direct orders. Egypt's temples, while they still function, but now they quietly etch a new name onto their walls. Caesar, Augustus, pharaoh by conquest, god by paperwork, and disturbingly, heir to an ancient crown he barely understands. You drift through Alexandria's quiet streets as the sun sets, the city glowing pink and amber under the fading light. Somewhere, deep within the palace, Cleopatra's final plans crumble. Outside, Roman banners already flap in the warm breeze. The age of true pharaohs is over. But the disturbing hybrid of Roman emperors, cosplaying as Egyptian gods, that's only just beginning. The salty air stings your nose as you drift along the shore near Alexandria, the dawn light turning the sea into molten gold. The Roman ships sit out on the horizon like patient, hungry sharks. You've seen enough to know this isn't some glorious age of exploration. It's a hostile takeover with better branding, and stepping onto Egyptian soil now, dressed not in armor but in smug entitlement, is Julius Caesar, the man himself. The conqueror, the statesman, the self-declared savior of the Republic. Though historians still argue whether Caesar ever intended to save anything but his own reflection. You pull your cloak tighter as you trail behind his grand procession, a mix of curious locals, wary Roman soldiers, and Egyptian officials trying to smile without giving away the dread tightening their stomachs. Caesar's arrival in Egypt isn't a victory. Paradite's damage control. You remember the whispers, civil war back in Rome, enemies lurking everywhere, and now, the chaos here in Alexandria, courtesy of Egypt's royal family. Cleopatra and her brother-husband locked in their absurd, bloody sibling rivalry over the throne. You pass the towering Pharaohs lighthouse, its flame still burning as a symbol of Egypt's engineering brilliance and its stubborn independence. But for how much longer? Caesar's not here for sightseeing. He's here because of politics, survival, and, if the rumors are true, because of Cleopatra herself. The palace is a confusing fusion of Greek elegance and Egyptian opulence. Columns, painted in bold lapis blues and ochre yellows. Floors inlaid with precious stones. Hieroglyphs creeping along the walls like whispers from a lost world. Caesar looks unimpressed by the architecture, but you catch the flicker of calculation in his eyes. See, Caesar's been called many things: dictator, genius, traitor, visionary. But in Egypt, he sees possibility, power, grain shipments for Rome, gold for his debts, and maybe, just maybe, a divine crown to bolster his already oversized ego. It doesn't take long before Caesar and Cleopatra become the most talked about duo on the Nile. Their alliance, romantic, political, and disturbingly theatrical, becomes the stuff of legend. You can practically hear the Roman Senate groaning from here. Historians still argue whether Caesar truly believed in Egypt's divine traditions, or if he simply played along for convenience. But facts are facts. He fathered a child with Cleopatra Caesarion, whose name means Little Caesar. Subtle, right? You trailed them as they cruised the Nile on a lavish royal barge, a floating palace dripping with gold, perfumed oils, and strategically positioned priests chanting in ancient tongues. Cleopatra, dazzling and sharp, plays her role to perfection, the reincarnation of Isis herself. Caesar, stoic and ambitious, lets the myth-making wash over him like the warm Egyptian sun. The locals, well, they're not entirely convinced. Sure, Cleopatra is their queen, albeit a Macedonian import, but Caesar, a Roman, parading around as the lover of a pharaoh, possibly the father of Egypt's next ruler. It's unsettling at best. You sip watered wine under the shade of a palm, watching the barge glide past lotus blooms. The Nile ripples with ancient secrets. Crocodiles lurk beneath the surface, and overhead, falcons circle sharped and silent symbols of Horus, protector of kings. You wonder if they approve of this strange Roman trying to play pharaoh. Caesar's time in Egypt isn't all romance and river cruises. There's political chaos, assassination attempts, and the infamous burning of the Library of Alexandria. Historians still debate whether Caesar truly caused the fire or simply stood by as the knowledge of centuries went up in smoke. What isn't debated, Caesar leaves Egypt with more than just memories. He leaves with Cleopatra's loyalty, with Egypt's grain secured for Rome, and, perhaps most disturbingly, with the first seeds planted for future emperors to inherit not just Caesar's political legacy but his audacious flirtation with divine kingship. You make your way back toward the bustling markets as Caesar departs. The locals haggle over spices, linen, and tiny clay charms designed to ward off evil. Maybe they'll need them. Rome's shadow stretches long across the Mediterranean now. Egypt has been conquered before, but this time, it feels different. The temples still stand. The priests still perform their ancient rites, but you can't help noticing some of those hieroglyphic carvings. They're being updated. New names, new faces, and one day soon, the name carved beneath the falcon-headed god won't be Egyptian at all. The title of pharaoh is changing hands, and no one, especially the gods, is ready for what comes next. The sails of the Roman triremes fade into the horizon, but Egypt doesn't breathe easy, not for long. You wander through the bustling alleys of Alexandria, stepping over cracked tiles older than Rome itself, and listen as the stories spread. Julius Caesar is gone, but the tangled mess he left behind, oh, that's just getting started. Because, while Cleopatra still clings to her throne, still whispers promises to the gods and her advisors, there's a storm brewing across the Mediterranean, and at its center stands a man who never asked to be pharaoh but somehow ends up with Egypt curled beneath his sandal. Augustus, or as the Egyptians will soon know him, Pharaoh by default. You drift through the cool shadows of the royal quarter, trailing after anxious merchants and wary Roman officials. Word has reached Egypt. Caesar is dead, assassinated, stabbed to ribbons by senators in the marble halls of Rome. Et tu, brute, and all that. But the aftershocks stretch far beyond the Forum. They ripple down the Nile, through the bazaars, the temples, the palaces, leaving fear and opportunity in their wake. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, emerges from the chaos, young, cold-eyed, ambitious in that unsettling Roman way. Mark Antony still looms large, Cleopatra's ally and lover, his legions stationed just beyond Egypt's borders. You can feel the tension knotting the air like storm clouds. Historians still argue whether Augustus ever wanted Egypt for himself, for whether Egypt was simply too valuable to ignore. But when Antony and Cleopatra's final gamble collapses at the Battle of Actium, the choice is made for him. You stand among the crowd as Octavian's ships anchor at Alexandria's harbor, their sails snapping in the hot desert wind. Egyptian soldiers look on, defeated. Priests clutch their relics. The last true pharaoh Cleopatra lies dead. Rumors swirl of poison, of asps, of desperate dignity. Octavian doesn't weep. He calculates. Egypt isn't just another province, it's a prize, a resource, a kingdom soaked in ancient power and golden grain. And so, with barely a whisper of ceremony, Octavian adds a new, awkward title to his collection, Pharaoh. The weirdness hits immediately. Rome, for all its might, doesn't fully understand Egypt. The Senate back home treats provinces like conquests, sources of taxes and manpower. But Egypt's different. Its priests declare the ruler a living god. Its people, though tired of Greek Ptolemies, still cling to the rituals, the myths, the expectation that their pharaoh isn't just mortal, an Octavian. Well, Octavian is very mortal. Ruthless, brilliant, paranoid, but mortal. Still, he plays along. You watch as Roman officials carve his name in hieroglyphs beside crocodile gods and falcon-headed deities. You squint at temple walls where Augustus, stiff, toga-clad, utterly out of place, is depicted offering to Ra, to Osiris, to the ancient pantheon that predates his empire by millennia. It's unsettling, like watching an accountant cosplay as a sun god. But it works, sort of. The grain keeps flowing. The temples begrudgingly adapt. Egypt becomes Augustus' personal domainer, locked treasure chest far from the prying eyes of the Senate. You pass a group of Roman soldiers patrolling Alexandria's streets. Their eyes linger warily on the grand statues of sphinxes and towering gods. They don't trust this place. The Egyptians, in turn, don't trust them. It's an uneasy truce wrapped in gold leaf and divine pageantry. But you can't help wondering, how long can this charade last? The Romans may call themselves pharaohs now, but Egypt remembers. The stones remember. And the gods are still watching. You wander down the sun-baked avenue leading to Alexandria's great harbor, your sandals scuffing against smooth, ancient paving stones. The city hums with quiet tension, but out here, by the water, the true source of Egypt's new reality rises and falls with the tides. Grain, mountains of it, hulking cargo ships bob at anchor, their wooden hulls groaning as crews scramble to load sack after sack of golden wheat. You step aside as sweaty laborers trudge past, balancing baskets of grain on their shoulders. It isn't glamorous, it isn't divine, but this is why Egypt matters to Rome. Forget the temples. Forget the strange hybrid ceremonies where Roman emperors squeeze themselves into pharaoh robes like reluctant actors in a badly cast play. The real power here, it comes from the fertile Nile Valley and the endless fields of wheat ripening beneath the desert sun. Historians still argue whether Augustus understood Egypt's spiritual significance, but one thing he grasped with unnerving clarity: whoever controls Egypt controls Rome's stomach. You peer down into the hold of a cargo ship. Stacked high, rows of sealed amphorae and tightly bound grain sacks fill every available space. Roman officials bark orders in clipped Latin while Egyptian scribes quietly tally the shipments in neat, curling hieroglyphs. The system is disturbingly efficient. The Nile floods, the fields bloom, the harvest comes in, and within weeks, fleets like this sail north, braving pirates, storms and treachery to ensure Roman citizens and, more importantly, Roman politicians have bread on their tables. It sounds simple. It isn't. You follow a nervous young official through Alexandria's labyrinthine grain warehouses. His sandals slap the stone floor, echoing against towering walls stacked with reserves of barley, wheat, and emmer. But he jumps at every shadow, eyes darting toward alleyways where conspirators might lurk. See, controlling Egypt's grain isn't just about feeding the empire, it's about power, and power breeds paranoia. Augustus knew it. Every emperor after him knew it. Egypt isn't just Rome's breadbasket, it's a loaded weapon aimed straight at the heart of the empire. You overhear whispers among the dock, rumors of grain shipments delayed, sabotage, maybe a mutiny brewing on the grain fleets. Hunger back in Rome isn't just an inconvenience, it's a spark for riots, for rebellions, for the Senate sharpening their daggers once more. The Roman emperors keep a tight grip on Egypt. No senator steps foot here without imperial approval. The governors report directly to the emperor, bypassing the usual political machinery. It's all carefully designed to prevent exactly what you're hearing murmured along the docks: a grain crisis that could unravel everything. As you stroll along the harbor walls, you can't help but admire the sheer, relentless logistics of it all. Hundreds of ships, thousands of tons of grain, months of careful coordination, all so that Rome can gorge itself on bread, while Egypt survives. Barely. The locals know the score. They see the grain sail away, week after week, while taxes rise and Roman soldiers prowl the streets. The temples stay open, sort of. The priests still chant. But beneath the ceremonies, frustration simmers. Egypt's vast resources enrich Rome, but the Egyptians, they get promises, taxes, and foreign gods clumsily painted onto sacred walls. You glance at a small shrine tucked beside the harbor. The statue is chipped and weathered, a faded crocodile. God Sobek, his toothy grin cracked with age. Someone's left an offering. bread, fish, a clay amulet, old traditions clinging on, quiet, stubborn, watchful, and yet, despite the discontent, the grain keeps flowing. Egypt, for all its ancient pride and complicated resentment, understands survival. The priests tolerate Roman rule for now. The farmers till their fields, harvest the wheat, and pray the Nile floods predictably. But the question hangs heavy in the air, like the desert heat pressing on your shoulders. How long can Rome squeeze Egypt before something snaps? You watch the last grain ship slip beyond the breakwaters, its sail billowing as it heads toward the open sea. The seagulls cry overhead, the waves lap against the stone docks. For now, Rome eats. For now, Egypt obeys. But beneath the surface, beneath the golden wheat and gleaming temples, the disturbing truth lingers like an itch under your skin. Power built on hunger never lasts forever. The sun beats down as you wind your way through the temple district of Thebes. The stone streets, radiating heat that blurs the edges of the colossal columns towering above you. Sand swirls in little devils at your feet, and even the gods seem to sweat beneath the relentless Egyptian sky. But despite the heat, the temple courtyards are crowded. Something unusual, disturbingly unusual is happening. You edge closer, ducking between linen-draped merchants and gawking locals, until you get a clear view. And there he is, a Roman emperor, dressed as a pharaoh. You can't help but blink. It's awkward. There's the leopard skin kilt, hanging stiffly over his perfectly polished Roman calves. The broad, flat collar glitters with inlaid gems, but sits uncomfortably over his imperial cloak. His head is wrapped in a stylized Nenes headdress, striped cloth worn by the pharaohs of old, and his expression is a delicate cocktail of forced reverence and thinly veiled irritation. You almost feel sorry for him. Almost. See, the Roman emperors didn't really want to be pharaohs, not in the mystical, crocodile-worshipping, living god sense that the Egyptians expected, but Egypt demanded a show. And Rome couldn't afford to ignore the stage. You shift through the crowd, watching the procession unfold. Priests in immaculate white linen chant in ancient Egyptian, their voices deep and hypnotic. Incense curls into the blue sky as temple musicians pluck harps and tap small bronze cymbals. The emperor strides stiffly toward the towering pylon gates, pausing as sacred oils are dabbed onto his hands, his brow, his feet. It's ceremonial theater. But to the Egyptians, this is survival. Their temples depend on the ruler's participation. Their gods demand the pharaoh's blessing. So, they dress the Roman in leopard skins, hand him ritual staffs, and pretend that everything is just as it was in the days of Ramses and Akhenaten. Historians still argue how seriously the Egyptians took these performances. Some believe they saw right through the Roman act, a necessary charade to keep their religious traditions afloat. Others claim many truly believed that divine spirit still flowed through their awkward foreign rulers, no matter how uncomfortable they looked, wrapped in linen and gold. You pass beneath the towering obelisks carved with hieroglyphs, each symbol whispering stories of ancient victories and god-kings. Now, new inscriptions creep along the stone, the emperor's name transliterated into hieroglyphs, forever immortalized beside crocodile gods and sun discs. It's both fascinating and faintly ridiculous. The emperor, let's say it's Tiberius, though honestly, they all did this eventually, grimaces, as priests smear scented unguents across his arms. His Roman advisors shift uncomfortably at the edges of the temple, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. You can practically hear their muttered Latin curses under their breath. But here's the unsettling part. No matter how strange it looks, no matter how much the emperor resents the performance, this blending of Roman imperial power and ancient Egyptian divinity works, at least on paper. The temples keep operating. The Nile's flooding is still praised as the pharaoh's divine favor. The grain flows to Rome, and Egypt, battered but proud, maintains a fragile illusion of continuity beneath foreign rule. You slip inside the temple's cool, shadowed halls, tracing your fingers along centuries-old carvings. Jackal-headed Anubis watches you from the walls. Lotus blooms unfurl in endless, stylized rows, and scattered among them, tucked awkwardly between falcons and scarabs, Roman names. It's all deeply theatrical, deeply political, and deeply unsettling. Rome, for all its marble columns and eagle standards, can't resist the seductive weight of Egypt's spiritual legacy. And Egypt, for all its resentment, plays along. But as you watch the emperor fumble his way through another sacred ritual, the disturbing truth settles in your bones. Egypt may survive, but it will never be the same. The cool shadows of the temple stretched long across the dusty courtyard as you wandered deeper inside, the faint clink of coin purses and muttered prayers drifting after you. It's not just sacred chants and awkward emperor rituals echoing through these ancient halls, no, tucked neatly behind the veils of incense and carved gods. There's another sound altogether, the soft, steady jingle of money. Because temples in Egypt, they aren't just houses of worship, they're banks and tax offices and political chessboards where priests count more than just blessings. You edge around a towering statue of Isis, the goddess's serene stone face watching as lines of officials shuffle parchment, tally grain quotas, and inspect stacks of gleaming coin. Roman denarii, Egyptian drachmas, even a few gold aurei glint under the torchlight, a quiet reminder that here in Egypt, faith and finance walk hand in hand. The temple's treasury, hidden behind thick stone walls, could rival the vaults of any Roman governor. Chests of coin, stockpiles of grain, priceless relics donated by desperate farmers or ambitious nobles, hoping to curry divine and political favor. It's disturbingly efficient. The priests play the long game. They know Rome's grip on Egypt is built not just on legions and awkward pharaoh cosplay, but on economics. Grain for Rome, taxes for Caesar, and temples, well-funded and seemingly loyal. To keep the locals spiritually pacified, you overhear a Roman tax collector arguing with a temple scribe. The language flips between clipped Latin and melodic Egyptian. The issue, the temple's tax exemptions. See, officially, religious institutions are supposed to pay their share, but in practice, temples have always operated with creative interpretations of the rules. Historians still argue how much control the Roman emperors really had over temple wealth. Some believe the priests quietly funneled resources toward resistance movements or hidden relic hoards. Others claim Augustus and his successors kept the temples on such a short financial leash that even the gods needed imperial permission to collect offerings. You trail your hand along the temple wall, running your fingers across delicate carvings of the Nile, its life-giving floods depicted as sacred, endless, dependable. Except even the Nile can be fickle, and when it is, grain shortages follow, and so do riots, tax rebellions, and, disturbingly often, political assassinations. A weary merchant beside you mutters a local proverb: when the temples fall silent, the Nile runs dry. It's only half a joke. Rome's administrators know Egypt's economy runs on more than just wheat and taxes. It runs on perception, on divine favor, temple authority, and the fragile illusion that the emperor pharaoh keeps the gods happy. That illusion keeps the grain ships moving, it keeps priests in their roles, it keeps Egyptian resentment simmering quietly beneath layers of bureaucracy. But you can't help noticing cracks in the marble facade. Roman soldiers stationed at temple entrances, watching the priests as closely as the worshippers. Quiet confiscations of temple lands disguised as reforms. The occasional unexplained disappearance of a particularly defiant priest. You stroll past a side chamber where ancient relics gleam in the torchlight. Amulets, mummified animals, delicate papyrus scrolls. The air hums with centuries of history and the faint scent of politics, wrapped in incense. The disturbing reality settles on your shoulders like desert dust. Egypt's temples may still chant to the gods, still carve the emperor's name alongside crocodile deities, but beneath the prayers lies a tangled web of taxes, bribery, and survival. And as the Roman coin jingles steadily into temple coffers, you wonder how long even the gods can pretend everything's fine. The city quiets as the sun slides below the desert horizon, but deep within the winding alleys of Fayum, the uneasy murmur of Egypt never truly sleeps. You follow the twisting streets, the smell of roasted fish and sweet dates lingering in the air, and before long, you stumble upon something peculiar. A temple small, tucked behind crumbling mud brick walls, but the statues flanking the entrance give you pause. Their mouths stretch wide, filled with jagged marble teeth. Their eyes are cold, reptilian. Their short, powerful limbs crouch, poised to strike. Crocodiles you swallow. Sobek's domain. And inside, the priests of the crocodile god count more than coins, they count enemies. The cult of Sobek has always been unsettling, even by Egyptian standards. Crocodiles are both feared and worshipped here. Their armored hides and ambush tactics a constant, dangerous reminder that the Nile, for all its life-giving blessings, can just as easily swallow you whole. You slip inside the temple, your footsteps muffled by reed mats, and the cool, shadowed interior smells of incense, river water, and something more metallic. You can't quite place it at first. Then you pass a large, shallow pool, and the realization slithers up your spine. There are live crocodiles in here, fat, sleek, ancient things, their scaly bodies glinting beneath the flickering torchlight as they float lazily in the sacred water. Some wear delicate gold ornaments on their necks. One has what looks disturbingly like a tiny jeweled crown perched between its eyes. The priests chant in low, rhythmic tones, their linen robes rustling as they move among the crocodiles with eerie familiarity. You try not to stare at the ritual, offering small fish, carved amulets, and, at the far end, what looks suspiciously like a mummified baby crocodile, wrapped neatly in linen and painted with gold leaf. You've heard the rumors, crocodile mummies by the hundreds, tombs filled with perfectly embalmed reptiles, their bodies preserved alongside human nobles, their souls according to temple doctrine intertwined with Sobek's divine protection. Historians still argue how seriously these cults took their practices. Some say it was genuine reverence, others whisper of darker motives: extortion, bribery, even murder disguised as religious sacrifice. You ease along the temple's edge, listening as locals trade stories in hushed tones. Fishermen dragged under by Nile redditors, sometimes dismissed as unfortunate accidents, sometimes not. A Roman tax collector who vanished after inspecting temple ledgers. His body found, days later, half-eaten, drifting downstream. The Romans, predictably, despise this place. They tolerate the grand temples of Ra, Isis, and Osiris for political stability. But the crocodile cults, they make even hardened centurions uneasy. Sobek's followers walk a razor-thin line between tolerated priests and feared conspirators, and yet, the emperor's name still appears on the temple walls, carefully chiseled alongside hieroglyphs older than Rome itself. The illusion of divine favor extends even here, among toothy jaws and suspicious disappearances. A young boy scuttles past with a basket of fish, tossing the offering into the sacred pool. The largest crocodile lunges, its jaws snapping with a sound like cracking timber. You flinch. The priests don't. You edge toward the exit, the heavy air clinging to your skin, and can't shake the feeling that eyes ancient, cold, reptilian are still watching you. It's easy to dismiss this place as superstition, easy to laugh at the crown-wearing crocodiles and the unsettling mummified remains. But beneath the theatrics, you sense something more dangerous slithering. Through Egypt's undercurrent, the Romans may wear the crown of Pharaoh now. They may carve their names into sacred temples and wrap themselves in divine titles. But Egypt has its own gods, its own teeth, its own ways of reminding arrogant rulers that no one emperor or notame is the Nile forever. The crocodile god fades behind you as you weave your way back through Fayum's streets, but the unsettling weight of those watchful reptilian eyes still clings to your shoulders. You shake it off, following the road that bends eastward, out of the fertile Nile Valley, and toward the ochre cliffs that loom like ancient sentinels over the desert horizon. Because tonight, you're going underground, into the Valley of the Kings. It feels wrong, somehow, to come here while the sun is still setting. The ancient tombs, hidden beneath the rugged limestone hills, belong to the dead, and in Egypt, the dead never truly rest. But the Romans have other ideas. You pick your way through narrow, dusty pathways, the scent of sun-baked stone sharp in your nose. The cliffs cast jagged shadows across the valley floor as you reach the tomb. Entrances, dozens of them, mouths gaping, open like forgotten promises. This isn't some forgotten graveyard. It's Egypt's ultimate backstage pass to eternity. A necropolis built for pharaohs who believed they could cheat death, slip past the crocodile jaws of the underworld, and emerge reborn among the stars. And now Rome owns it. You trail behind a group of Roman officials, their sandals scraping against the stone as they inspect the tomb entrances. Their togas are travel-stained, their expressions wary. They're not here for sightseeing. They're here for control. Egypt's tombs aren't just sacred, they're political. Gold, jewels, priceless relics buried with the dead. It's enough to make even the most practical Roman administrator reconsider his stance on grave robbing or state-sanctioned archaeological management. as they probably prefer to call it. You glance at the painted walls inside one of the tombs, scenes of the pharaoh's journey through the afterlife, jackal-headed Anubis guiding his soul, scales weighing the heart against a feather. The artwork is ancient, exquisite, and faintly vandalized. Roman graffiti, scrawled in sloppy Latin, mars the corner of the chamber. Historians still argue how much respect the Romans had for these tombs. Some emperors issued strict protections, hands off the dead gods of Egypt, they warned. Others, not so much. Rumors of looting, missing artifacts, and quietly smuggled treasures abound. You duck into another tomb, your footsteps muffled by centuries of dust. Here, the walls still gleam with faded pigment, deep blues, golds, the sacred red ochre of divine protection. But there's something else. Tucked into the corner, a small, worn inscription in Greek, not ancient Egyptian, not Latin. It reads, "In life, Augustus ruled the empire. In death, Egypt endures." You smile despite yourself, a quiet reminder that stone lasts longer than titles. The locals, of course, have their own stories. They whisper that disturbing things happen when the tombs are disturbed, that Roman officials who steal from the Valley of the Kings suffer sudden illnesses, disappearances, or worse, the wrath of the ancient gods creeping across their dreams like a sandstorm. You listen, half skeptical, half unsettled. After all, crocodile cults still thrive, temples still chant, and here in the valley, the bones of pharaohs lie silent, but never forgotten. The Romans may have taken the crown, may stamp their faces on coins beside hieroglyphs, but down here, in the cool, musty silence of the tombs, Egypt keeps its secrets. And as you brush your fingers across the carved walls, tracing the faded outline of an ankh, the symbol of eternal life, you wonder, maybe some titles can't be stolen. Maybe, beneath the politics and pageantry, Egypt belongs to the dead, and they're still watching. The cool, tomb-scented air still clings to your clothes as you make your way back toward the Nile, the faint shimmer of its waters visible beyond the dunes. You've seen the Valley of the Kings, the final resting place of Egypt's divine rulers. But tonight, you find yourself walking through the place where living pharaohs were supposed to prove their power. Memphis, or what's left of it. The once mighty capital of Egypt sprawls before you, ancient and crumbling in the moonlight. Columns lean like tired old men. Walls bear scars of age, conquest, and sandstorms. But still, it breathes history. The Romans walk these streets now, their boots and sandals kicking up dust that has buried centuries of Egyptian pride. Statues of old kings, weathered but defiant, peer out from temple courtyards. Carved lotus flowers droop from forgotten stone friezes. It's quiet, too quiet for a city that once crowned pharaohs. You trail behind a small group of Roman officials and Egyptian priests as they make their way to the heart of it all, the Temple of Ptah, once the glittering jewel of Memphis, now a strange, half-abandoned relic caught between two worlds. The priests still tend the fires. Their chants echo faintly off crumbling walls, but their numbers are few, their robes patched, their offerings humble compared to the gold-drenched rituals of the past. You can practically feel the resentment in the air, the heavy, reluctant cooperation between Egyptian tradition and Roman politics. Inside the temple courtyard, a colossal statue looms on its side, half buried in sand. It's Ramses II, or what remains of him. His stone face stares at the sky, cracked but unmistakably proud. You pause, staring into those ancient eyes, and can't help but wonder if he'd be laughing or raging at the state of his empire now. Historians still argue how deliberately Rome allowed Egypt's old capitals to decay. Some suggest it was strategically let the past fade so Roman power feels inevitable. Others say it was simple neglect, the inevitable wear and tear of time. But the Egyptians, they remember. You pass an old woman selling lotus garlands beside the temple gates. Her eyes flick toward the Roman officials, then back to you. Quietly, almost conspiratorially, she presses a wilted lotus into your palm and whispers, "The Nile forgets nothing." It sends a chill down your spine. The Romans may build new cities, plant their standards along the Nile, force their language onto coins and documents, but Memphis remembers. And so do the people. You wander through the market stalls, clinging stubbornly to life along the outskirts. Faded papyrus charms hang beside Roman bronze trinkets. Statues of Horus share shelf space with clay figurines of Jupiter. It's a strange, unsettling fusion. And yet, even here, Rome's title as pharaoh hangs awkwardly in the air. The emperor's name is whispered in prayers, sometimes earnestly, sometimes with gritted teeth. His image appears in temple carvings. His coinage jingles in the pockets of merchants. But his understanding of Egypt, that's as fragile as the cracked limestone beneath your feet. You sit by the edge of a crumbling stone fountain as the moon rises higher. Frogs croak softly from the marsh beyond. In the distance, the ruins of Memphis stretch like bones across the earth. The pharaohs built this city to last forever. But nothing lasts forever. Not even crowns. Not even gods. And as the sand shifts in the wind and Memphis fades into shadow, you wonder how long before Egypt's memories rise again, unsettling and sharp as a crocodile's grin. The Nile gleams beneath the moonlight as you drift south, the river curling like a silver ribbon through the heart of Egypt. The great cities fade behind fractured pride of Memphis. The Roman-dominated streets of Alexandria, and in their place rises something older, something disturbingly patient. The desert. Endless dunes stretch in every direction, the land cracked and dry, save for the thin green veins of civilization hugging the riverbanks. But even out here, away from marble columns and imperial banners, Rome's shadow follows you. Your destination, Elephantine Island, a jagged rocky outcrop near the first cataract of the Nile. To most, it's just a dusty, sun-bleached settlement, clinging to the southern frontier. But to the Romans and anyone who's been paying attention, it's the key to Egypt's underbelly. Because Egypt doesn't just feed Rome, it guards her borders. As you step off the creaking riverboat and onto the island's rocky shore, you see them immediately. Roman soldiers, their armor dull from desert wind, their faces weathered, their eyes sharp and exhausted. The legion stationed here isn't the pampered ceremonial guard you saw patrolling Alexandria's temples. These are border troops, the empire's human shield against chaos. You trail after them through the small, sand-blown settlement. Stone walls patched with mud brick, a modest temple to Khnum, the ram-headed god who shaped humanity from clay, its carvings faded but defiant. And always, the low murmur of soldiers muttering in Latin as they clean weapons, check supply lines, and glance south toward the Nubian hills. Historians still argue whether Rome ever truly controlled Egypt's southern border. Officially, this is all imperial territory, part of the vast province under the emperor's direct rule. Unofficially, it's a powder keg. The Nubians, fierce and proud, watch Egypt like hawks. Some trade, some scheme, and some test the Roman defenses with raids and whispered threats carried on desert winds. You pass a Roman officer overseeing fort repairs, his armor dusty, his patience thinner than Nile water in a drought. His men joke about crocodiles and heatstroke, but their hands never stray far from their weapons. Even the priests here, loyal to the empire, are at least appearing to keep their prayers short and their eyes sharp. The temple walls still depict the pharaoh offering to the gods, but the face, it's Roman now. A stiff, unfamiliar portrait of the emperor etched beside images of Khnum and Nile spirits. You wonder if the locals actually believe in these awkward divine mergers, or if they just go along to avoid unwanted attention. Aside, you notice the faint outline of a Nubian trader unloading where his incense, ivory, ostrich, feathers his smile, polite but guarded. There's no love for Rome here, but there's calculation. You sit by the water's edge, watching the Nile churn over jagged rocks, and the disturbing truth settles like desert dust. Egypt may appear conquered, its cities patrolled, its temples co-opted, but out here, on the ragged frontier, the empire is only ever one bad season, one bold enemy, one slip-up away from losing its grip. The Romans wear the crown of pharaoh. They tax the land, carve their names into temples, even play along with awkward crocodile cults. But Egypt, wild, vast ancient Egypt, refuses to be tamed entirely. And as the sun dips behind the Nubian hills and the soldiers light their campfires, you can't help but wonder how many emperors actually understand that. The desert wind hums low as you drift back north along the Nile, the great river snaking through endless reeds and glistening green fields. Egypt always looks peaceful from the waterleys feluccas gliding past, birds diving for fish, papyrus swaying like it's whispering secrets. But tonight, your destination isn't peaceful. It's one of the most unsettling places Egypt has to offer. The Scrapeum.u disembark at Saqqara, the sprawling necropolis just outside the ruins of Memphis. It's quiet now, the old pyramids little more than jagged silhouettes against the dusky sky, but buried beneath these sands, that's where the disturbing legacy of Rome's rule takes a sharp, shadowy turn. The Serapeum, the underground tomb, complex for the sacred Apis bulls. The Egyptian cult of the Apis bull is strange enough by itself. Imagine venerating a living, breathing animal as a divine oracle, a walking symbol of strength, fertility, and royal legitimacy. When the Apis bull dies, it doesn't just get buried, it gets a full pharaoh's funeral, mummified, blessed, and sealed in a vast granite sarcophagus deep underground. You follow the flickering torchlight through the dusty tunnels, the walls slick with ancient soot. The passage twists and turns like the inside of some colossal sandstone beast. Your footsteps echo. The air is cold, heavy, watchful. Even after all these centuries, the Serapeum feels alive. Rows upon rows of massive granite coffins line the cavernous chambers. Each one weighs as much as a small house. Each one holds the remains of an Apis bull that once commanded the reverence of kings, priests, and peasants alike. But now, Roman soldiers patrol these sacred catacombs, their boots clicking against the stone like an invasion of time itself. Their presence is more than just unsettling, it's a symptom of Rome's clumsy attempt to merge divine Egypt with pragmatic empire building. Historians still argue why the Romans tolerated these bizarre animal cults. Some say it was respect for local tradition, a practical way to pacify the people. Others suggest it was political theater. After all, a living Apis bull was considered a symbol of the pharaoh's divine favor, and the Romans, they were desperate. To convince Egypt they deserved the crown, you pass a scribe chiseling fresh inscriptions near one of the sarcophagi. The hieroglyphs praise the Emperor Tiberius, maybe, or Hadrianus, protector of Egypt and chosen of the gods. Never mind that those gods now coexist awkwardly with Roman standards and bureaucratic tax collectors. The Apis cult continues. Preserved in the shadows, its rituals altered but not erased. Bulls still parade through the streets. Priests still interpret their behavior as divine messages. The temples still hum with incense and quiet suspicion. But as you run your hand along the cool stone of a sarcophagus, the disturbing irony hits you. These animals are treated with more reverence than most human subjects of Rome. Above ground, Egyptian farmers break their backs growing grain for distant marble-walled cities. Merchants scrape by under crushing taxes. Priests bow their heads, chanting half-hearted blessings for emperors they barely tolerate. But the Apis bull, it's pampered, adored, laid to rest in unimaginable luxury when it dies. You can't decide if it's comforting or deeply unsettling. The torchlight flickers. Somewhere in the shadows, a priest whispers a prayer to Ptah, to Osiris, to gods whose statues still dominate Egypt's skyline, even as Roman soldiers sharpen their swords beside them. And as you turn to leave the Serapeum, the heavy silence of the tomb settles into your bones. The bulls may be buried, but Egypt's uneasy, complicated reverence for gods, emperors, and the space between still walks the streets, still floats along the Nile, still waits, patient and watchful, beneath the sand. The dusty, sacred chill of the Serapeum still lingers on your skin as you drift north, back toward the coast. Alexandria rises ahead, glittering beneath a soft dawn haze, its white marble villas and towering columns catching the morning sunlight, a city pretending to be Rome but never quite pulling it off. You step onto its bustling streets, and the first thing you notice, the voices. Greek, Latin, Egyptian, a dozen accents blending into one restless, chaotic hum. Alexandria isn't just a port, it's a pressure cooker. The greatest city in Egypt, birthplace of scholars, harbor of merchants, and, increasingly, a political headache for Rome. You duck past traders haggling over papyrus and amphorae of olive oil, weaving through the narrow alleys toward the true heart of the city, the library, or what remains of it, the great library of Alexandria. Once a beacon of human knowledge, home to scrolls from every corner of the known world, the place where minds like Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth, and Herophilos dissected human bodies long before Rome dreamed of concrete aqueducts. But now the scrolls gather dust, or burn, or quietly vanish. Historians still argue about what really happened to the library. Some blame Julius Caesar, his soldiers accidentally torching the docks and libraries during their Egyptian campaign. Others whisper of religious zealots or political purges erasing inconvenient knowledge. You stroll along the marble steps, the grand facade still imposing, but cracks spider along the columns. Inside, scholars whisper half-heartedly in the corners, carefully selecting what knowledge survives imperial approval. A Roman officer stands nearby, his hand resting on the hilt of his gladius, eyes sharp. He's not here for literature. He's here to make sure the wrong ideas, the dangerous ones, survive the day. Rome wears the crown of Pharaoh, but knowledge makes them nervous. Egypt's intellectual legacy, astronomy, medicine, philosophy is both admired and feared. The empire thrives on control, and nothing is harder to control than ideas. You run your fingers along the empty shelves, where scrolls once lived. You imagine the lost histories, the forgotten sciences, the banned philosophies, drifting like ash on the wind. And yet, Alexandria refuses to die quietly. You follow the crowd toward the harbor, where colossal ships rock gently in the waves, and the lighthouse of Pharaohs pierces the sky, a marvel of engineering that even the Romans respect. Traders unload silks from India, spices from Arabia, grain from Egypt's interior. The city hums with wealth, ambition, and tension. You catch snippets of conversation, merchants grumbling about taxes, Greek philosophers debating in shaded courtyards, Egyptian dockworkers muttering in their own tongue, their eyes darting toward Roman patrols. Alexandria may belong to the empire on paper, but in spirit, it's still a free-thinking, stubborn, fragmented beast. The emperor's portrait appears on the city's coins, stamped beside images of Nile gods and imperial eagles. His name adorns official documents and temple inscriptions. But in Alexandria's back alleys, his authority feels fragile. The library may be diminished, the scholars may tread carefully, but knowledge has a way of slipping through cracks, of whispering its survival in quiet corners where no soldier dares follow. As the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows across Alexandria's stone streets, you can't help but smile. Rome may have conquered Egypt, they may wear the crown of Pharaoh, patrol the temples, and count the grain, but knowledge never kneels. The salty tang of the Mediterranean still clings to your clothes as you drift away from Alexandria's sprawling harbor, your sandals scuffing over well-worn stone roads. But tonight, your path veers far from the grand villas, the scholars' whispered debates, and the sea breeze rustling papyrus scrolls. Instead, you find yourself at a much quieter place, a Roman villa tucked discreetly along the Nile Delta, one of many built after the conquest. At first glance it looks like any affluent estate from the Italian countryside. But this one hides something stranger than marble columns and perfumed gardens. The emperor's secret weapon, Egyptian mystics. You've heard the rumors swirling like Nile mist. Roman elites, wealthy governors, even emperors themselves, quietly seeking out Egyptian magicians, astrologers, and soothsayers. They come for blessings, cures, predictions. But beneath the incense and cryptic words lies something more disturbing, a dangerous obsession with controlling fate. You slip through the villa's shaded portico, passing statues of Venus awkwardly nestled beside amulets of Anubis. It's a weird, unsettling fusion, the sleek, orderly lines of Roman luxury mashed together with symbols far older, far stranger. In the central courtyard, a small group gathers, senators, wives, military officers, and one particularly nervous-looking Roman official sit cross-legged as an Egyptian priest traces patterns in sand, murmuring invocations in his melodic, ancient tongue. They lean in, desperate for answers, for protection, for a glimpse beyond the veil. Historians still argue how much these Roman elites truly believed the Egyptian mystics. Some say it was harmless, exotic curiosity, wealthy fools dabbling in incense and vague prophecies. Others insist these private rituals shaped real politics, influencing imperial decisions from the shadows. You watch as the priest produces a delicate papyrus scroll, covered in astrological charts. He points to the sky, Orion rising, Venus shifting, and murmurs of omens filled the courtyard. Someone asks about the emperor's future, another whispers about grain harvests and Nile floods, and you can't help but feel uneasy. This isn't just superstition, it's power. The Romans love order, laws, legions, marble forums, but Egypt laughs at that. Egypt trades in uncertainty, ancient rituals, cryptic symbols painted on tomb walls, gods with animal heads, and the seductive promise that somewhere, somehow, you can cheat fate. It's disturbingly appealing. Even emperors, wrapped in divine titles, clutch at these rituals like drowning men. You've heard the stories. Octavian consulting Egyptian priests before sailing to act. Later, emperors secretly commissioning horoscopes or protective amulets, crafted by Nile mystics. You notice a small wooden idol tucked beside the villa's fountain, a crude crocodile figure, its toothy grin barely hidden beneath trailing lotus vines. Another layer of quiet, unsettling insurance. It's easy to mock the rituals, the strange chants, the star charts, the animal-headed godspot. The line between political theater and genuine belief here is razor-thin. The empire's public face may sneer at Egyptian magic, but behind closed doors, Rome gorges itself on it. The sun dips lower, the priest finishes his reading, and the Romans murmur their thanks, slipping coins and small tokens into his hands. You follow them out into the twilight, the Nile rippling like molten gold beyond the villa walls. And as you leave, you wonder, for all their legions and laurels, maybe even the most powerful emperors lie awake at night, clutching little crocodile charms under their pillows, whispering prayers to gods they barely understand. The delta air grows cooler as you drift inland, leaving behind the marble villas and whispered fortunes of Roman governors. The Nile unfurls like dark silk under the starlight, its gentle currents hiding secrets older than any emperor. But tonight, you're not chasing politics or forgotten tombs. You're following the quiet, unnerving trail of Egypt's oldest obsession, the afterlife. You arrive at a small, unassuming village tucked along the Nile's edge, one of countless settlements dotting the fertile floodplains. Mud brick houses lean together like tired shoulders. Clay pots sit by doorways. But the real draw here, the EMBALMERS. Death, in Egypt, isn't an end. It's a business. The locals call them the House of Purification Workers, priests, artisans, and specialists, who've spent generations perfecting the unsettling, meticulous craft of turning flesh into eternity. And despite Rome's marble temples and imperial taxes, the Egyptians refuse to abandon the art of mummification. You slip through narrow alleys until the faint scent of natron salt and resin curls through the night air. A modest workshop comes into view, dimly lit by flickering oil lamps. Inside, the work begins. A linen-wrapped body rests on a low stone table. Priests in simple robes move with practiced care, their faces unreadable as they clean, pack, and bind the dead for their journey beyond. The tools are ancient bronze hooks, delicate blades, polished jars waiting for preserved organs. It's strangely serene, disturbingly methodical. The Romans, predictably, don't know what to make of it. Some scoff at these morbid traditions, viewing them as superstitious relics of a bygone era. Others, particularly those stationed here long enough, grow quietly respectful. Because in Egypt, death isn't hidden behind marble mausoleums or cremation pyres. It walks among the living. You lean in as one of the embalmers carefully removes the brain through the nose, his movements efficient, clinical. Another tends to the canopic jar of small vessels, bearing the heads of falcons, jackals, and baboons. Historians still argue how much mummification persisted under Roman rule. Some say the practice declined, stifled by imperial laws and shifting religious tides. Others insist the art thrived in quiet pockets like this, stubborn and unyielding. Tucked away from the empire's watchful gaze, a local whispers that even Roman officials sometimes secretly commission mummifications for loved ones, fearing that Roman gods can't guarantee eternity the way Egyptian rituals claim to. You catch sight of a papyrus scroll tucked beside a workbench, a faded illustration of Osiris, god of the dead, his green skin and crook and flail still vivid despite age. The embalmer hums softly as he works, an ancient funerary hymn drifting through the lamplit room. The walls bear faded carvings, ankhs, lotus flowers, protective spells scratched in hieroglyphs. It's unsettling, intimate, and disturbingly practical. Outside, the village continues its quiet rhythm. Farmers tend goats, children chase each other along the riverbank, but beneath it all lies the ever-present hum of preparation for death, for eternity, for the delicate dance between life and what waits beyond. Rome may wear the crown. Their laws may dictate taxes, trade, and military patrols, but here, in the embalmer's workshop, Egypt still claims the soul. You step back into the cool night air, the faint scent of resin and natron lingering like a memory. And as the Nile ripples beside you, dark and endless, you realize Crowns rust, empires fall, but the dead endure. The embalmer's workshop fades behind you as the Nile winds ever onward, carrying you past sleepy villages and crumbling temple ruins. The river, wide and patient, reflects the pale glow of the moon like molten glass. But tonight, you're not just following the current, you are chasing a rumor, a story that begins in whispered conversations and ends in one of the most unsettling rituals of all: divine birthright. You dock near a modest temple on the outskirts of Thebes. The grand monuments of Luxor and Karnak loom in the distance. But this place is different, humble, tucked away, but its walls bear a curious, familiar symbol: carved lotus flowers, falcons, and the unmistakable figure of the pharaoh suckling at the breast of a goddess. Divine motherhood, immortal propaganda. It's an old trick, as ancient as Egypt itself. Pharaohs weren't just kings, they were living gods. Their legitimacy, their authority, their terrifying power, all traced back to one singular, disturbingly convenient claim: they were born of the gods. You slip inside the temple. Faded murals stretch across the walls, their colors stubborn despite the centuries. In delicate strokes, they tell the story of Hatshepsut, female pharaoh, her conception orchestrated by the god Amen, her mother's belly blessed, her birth a celestial event that made her rightful queen and divine ruler. It's not just mythology, it's ancient PR. The Romans, oh, they latched onto this trick fast. When they took Egypt, they didn't just grab grain and temples, they snatched the divine narrative. Suddenly, the emperor wasn't just a foreign ruler, he was Pharaoh, God-chosen of course. The Egyptians weren't fooled. Not entirely. They knew Augustus wasn't birthed by Isis or blessed by Ammon, but generations of propaganda etched in stone, painted on temple walls, whispered by priests, blurred the lines enough to keep the peace mostly. Historians still argue how much ordinary Egyptians truly bought into the Emperor as God myth. Some point to temple reliefs where Roman emperors appear in full pharaoh regalia, offering to the gods like ancient kings. Others note the quiet resistance, the hidden shrines, the preserved old ways untouched by imperial theater. You trail your fingers across the carved image of a Roman emperor, maybe Hadrian, maybe Antoninus, pious crowned with the twin plumes of Ammon, his hand raised in ritual greeting. It's awkward. His features are undeniably Roman, his tunic peeking beneath the elaborate Egyptian headdress. It feels like watching a bad actor fumble through a sacred play. But the set design, still flawless. A priest nearby tends to an offering table, rearranging lotus blossoms and bread loaves with quiet care. He notices you, his gaze steady but unreadable. They call him Pharaoh. The priest murmurs, not naming the emperor aloud. But Egypt remembers. Outside, the faint hum of temple chants drifts. Through the night, the stars gleam above, the same constellations worshipped by priests long before Rome's legions ever dreamed of conquest. It's a disturbingly clever system. The emperor takes the title. The priests play along, some out of fear, some for the temple's survival, some perhaps clinging to the hope that divine favor still flows, no matter who wears the crown. But beneath the murals and ceremonies, Egypt keeps her own tally. That as you step back into the cool desert air, the temple's ancient stones warm beneath your hand, you can't help but wonder how many emperors believe their own divine press releases, and how many understand that in Egypt, gods are patient, but they never forget pretenders. Thebes fades behind you as the Nile curls south, winding past reed beds and crumbling ruins that whisper forgotten prayers to the restless night. The river carries you onward, not just through geography, but deeper into Egypt's unsettling reality, because tonight, you're not following emperors or priests, you're following whispers of rebellion. You dock near a small town hidden among the papyrus fields. Its mud brick houses crouched low, their windows shuttered against the desert wind. At first glance, it's ordinary quiet, poor, sleepy, but you've been listening to the subtle, dangerously familiar rhythm of unrest. See, Egypt might be Rome's breadbasket, the jewel of Augustus's conquests, but it's never been tame. Beneath the temples and taxes, beneath the painted murals of emperors pretending to be pharaohs, a different Egypt simmers. And when it boils over, even the legions can't hold it down. You slip through narrow alleys as hushed voices drift through. The dark farmers, merchants, scribes, their eyes dart toward the shadows as they talk of grain shortages, of brutal tax collectors, of temple lands confiscated for imperial projects. Talk of revolt. Historians still argue how widespread rebellion really was in Roman Egypt. Some claim the province simmered with constant resistance bandits, tax riots, localized uprisings. Others insist Rome's grip, though uncomfortable, kept things mostly quiet. But the truth feels a lot like this. You trail behind a group, moving cautiously toward a half-ruined granary. Inside, the air is thick with dust and whispered anger. Someone holds up a faded coin Roman, stamped with the emperor's profile, and spits on it. Others nod grimly. The grievances are familiar. The harvests shrank. The taxes didn't. The temples lost lands. The Roman governors gained them. The Nile fought. Did the empire? Didn't care. It's disturbingly simple math. A wiry man, his skin weathered from sun and labor, unrolls a rough map drawn on linen. He points to villages marked with small charcoal symbols. Places like this one, places where people are angry, enough to risk everything. You listen as they mutter, strategists blocking roads, sabotaging grain shipments, hiding temple relics before Roman officials can seize them. It's not some grand, organized revolution. It's the slow, steady drip of defiance, and it terrifies the empire. You've heard the old tales, the bucolic war, when rebel farmers brought Lower Egypt to a standstill, when Roman garrisons scrambled, when taxes dried up and panic spread all the way to Rome. The empire crushed it eventually, of course, but the scar never healed. The rebels tonight speak softer. They've learned, no banners, no open battles, just quiet, strategic resistance, and maybe that's more dangerous. You slip out as the meeting dissolves, their plans folded into baskets and beneath cloaks. The town returns to its sleepy facade. Goats bleat softly. Children chase each other in the dust. But the anger, it lingers. The moon glints off the Nile as you drift north again. The temples chant. The emperors preen. The officials tally grain and taxes like nothing's wrong. But Egypt's patience, it has limits. And you can't help but wonder when the next rebellion comes. Will Rome's crown of Pharaoh be enough to stop it? The Nile carries you back north, its wide, dark waters rolling silently beneath a blanket of stars. But even with the soft lapping of waves against the boat, your mind hums with unease. You've walked among crocodile cults, tomb robbers, imperial mystics, and rebels. And still, Egypt has more to reveal. Tonight, you're headed toward one of its most unsettling, contradictory spectacles, the Roman military presence at the Temple of Karnak. Thebes rises ahead, ghostly and grand under the moonlight. But you're not here to marvel at the temple's beauty. You're here to witness the strange, uneasy theater of conquest, dressed up as piety. Karnak's prowling, magnificent, heavy with the weight of millennia. Its colossal pylons and forest of columns stretch skyward, carved with hieroglyphs that outdate Rome by centuries. Gods peer down from every surface. Somenra, Mut, Khonsu, watchful, proud, and undoubtedly unimpressed by Rome's shiny new titles. But tonight, the temple isn't filled with priests and pilgrims. It's crawling with soldiers. Roman legions march stiffly through the courtyards, their sandals clacking against ancient flagstones, their tunics jarringly out of place amid lotus carvings and sandstone sphinxes. You watch them assemble near the sacred lake, their centurion barking orders that echo between the towering columns. It's disturbingly surreal. Historians still argue why Rome stationed troops at sacred sites like Karnak. Some say it was pure practicality, protect the temples from bandits and looters. Others suggest it was intimidation, a quiet reminder that the gods themselves now bowed to imperial authority. But the locals, they see through the performance. You pass a group of Egyptian temple workers huddled near the entrance. Their faces are unreadable, their words quiet, but their eyes linger on the soldiers, not with respect, but with something colder. You duck inside the hypostyle hall, its towering columns like a petrified forest frozen in stone. The walls tell stories of Pharaohs' victories, offerings, divine lineage etched deep into the sandstone. But tucked beside them, awkward and recent, newer carvings deface the sacred art. Roman symbols, Latin inscriptions, badly proportioned portraits of emperors in pharaoh garb. It feels desperate. A Roman officer passes by, his expression smug as he gestures to the defaced reliefs. Proof, he boasts to his companions, that Rome doesn't just rule the Nile. We inherit the gods themselves. You swallow a laughter, maybe a shudder. Egypt's gods aren't so easily inherited. Nearby, a priest lights incense at a shrine half hidden behind scaffolding. His prayers are quiet, his posture stiff beneath the watchful eyes of the soldiers. You wonder if his words are meant for the gods, or for anyone willing to listen behind closed doors. It's disturbingly clear. Karnak has become a symbol of Rome's uneasy balancing act. The empire wants Egypt's grain, its wealth, its strategic position, and its sacred legitimacy. But the temples, the carvings, the people, they remember. You leave the temple grounds as the soldiers resume their drills. Their discipline precise but brittle. The giant stone scarabs, the towering obelisks, the faded glory of Karnak. They've seen conquerors come and go, and as the desert wind whispers through the columns, rattling the papyrus banners like ghostly applause, you wonder, will Rome be any different, or just another set of names soon to crumble into the sand? The towering shadows of Karnak fade behind you as you slip away under the bruised purple sky, following the Nile's sleepy curve back toward Egypt's heart. You'd think the empire's grandest temples, its gods, its armors all that heavy, marble and gold, would be the most disturbing part of Roman Egypt. But no, tonight, the real unsettling truth, it's buried in paperwork. You disembark at Hermopolis, an ancient city named for Thoth, ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and, well, bureaucracy. It's fitting, really, because this is where Rome's most insidious, soul-draining tool thrives. Administration. Forget the crocodile cults and mummy-making. If anything haunts Egypt now, it's the scribes. You duck into a government office tucked between limestone facades. No statues of emperors here. No incense. Just papyrus scrolls stacked high. Officials hunched over wax tablets. The soft, scratchy whisper of quills working late into the night. The walls are plastered with edicts in Greek, Egyptian demotic, and increasingly stiff, awkward Latin. It's disturbingly clinical and deeply exhausting. The empire, for all its military might, knows real control happens here in tax records, census rolls, and endless receipts. A harried scribe shuffles past you, scrolls tucked under one arm, ink-stained fingers twitching. With fatigue, his colleague curses softly over a miscopied tax list. An overseer barks about grain quotas, his voice tight with worry. See, Rome doesn't just tax Egypt, it bleeds it dry. One neatly copied number at a time. Historians still argue whether this level of bureaucracy was efficient or oppressive. Some admire the empire's ability to track every bushel of grain, every goat, every household. Others see it as the slow strangulation of a once proud civilization, beneath mountains of parchment and wax seals. You scan the latest census scroll. 8 fishermen in the village of Busiris, 212 goats registered in Thebes, 14 temple workers reassigned to Roman projects. It's disturbingly thorough. Even death doesn't free you. The tax on mummification, temple fees, burial permits, it all adds up. Egypt's priests and peasants alike shuffle beneath the same inescapable, papyrus-wrapped web. The scribes, they're the quiet pharaohs now. Their ink replaces royal decrees. Their ledgers carve deeper scars than swords. You slip outside as the bureaucrats burn oil late into the night, their faces haggard but determined. The Nile shimmers beyond the city walls, cool and wide, carrying grain north to Rome. It's efficient, ruthless, and disturbingly clever. You pass a group of villagers, grumbling in hushed tones about new taxes and land, on cattle, even on temple offerings. Their eyes flick toward the scribe offices with thinly veiled resentment. The Romans may not walk the streets in golden crowns, but they rule with ink and math. And sometimes, that's more terrifying than armies. As you walk the Nile's edge, the moon rising like an ancient coin in the sky, you realize, empires fall to swords, sure, but they're built and broken by the quiet scratching of a pen. The quiet hiss of quills and rustle of parchment fade behind you as you drift downriver, leaving Hermopolis to its ledgers and late-night tax collectors. But the unsettling part, the ink-stained bureaucracy, isn't confined to dusty offices. It follows you like a shadow, tucked into every corner of Egyptian life now. You're headed to the breadbasket within the breadbasket, a lush, strangely fertile depression southwest of the Nile, fed by ancient irrigation canals and quiet Roman ambition. At first glance, it feels like paradise. You glide past orchards heavy with figs and pomegranates. Fields stretch out in neat rows, fat with barley and wheat. Villagers dot the landscape, their walls sun-bleached but sturdy. The air hums with the sound of tools. Water wheels creak along irrigation ditches, and for a moment you could almost believe the empire's promises of prosperity. Almost, because beneath the surface, Fayum reveals Rome's most disturbing legacy. In Egypt, not temples, not soldiers, but social engineering. You pass settlements with unfamiliar names: Crocodilopolis, Arsino, Philadelphia, towns founded or renamed by Ptolemies and Romans alike, planted like foreign seeds in Egyptian soil. The people, a bizarre, unsettling blend. Greek merchants in crisp linen tunics haggle beside Egyptian farmers caked in mud. Roman officials strut through crowded markets, their togas woefully out of place among palm trees and lotus sellers. And everywhere, the quiet friction of worlds colliding. You duck into a shaded courtyard where a small crowd gathers. On display, something both beautiful and disturbingly out of place. A Fayum mummy portrait. You've heard of these stunning, hyper-realistic paintings of the dead, placed over their rapt, mummified faces. The effect is unsettling. You stare into the painted eyes of a young man, his skin pale, his curls carefully styled in the Roman fashion, a golden wreath circling his head, but beneath the portrait, a linen-wrapped Egyptian corpse. Greek art, Roman fashion, Egyptian death rituals, all mashed together into a quiet, eerie contradiction. Historians still debate what these portraits really mean. Some see them as assimilation immigrants adopting Egyptian customs to claim legitimacy. Others view them as resistance in Egyptian death traditions beneath foreign faces. Either way, they're a stark, disturbing reminder. Identity here is fluid and fragile. You walk through the village streets, the painted eyes of the dead lingering in your mind. The shops sell Roman wine beside Nile-grown honey. Temples to Egyptian gods stand awkwardly beside shrines for Greek deities. Official notices are posted in Greek, Latin, and Demotic, a linguistic juggling act that leaves everyone dizzy. The empire wants unity, but Egypt stubbornly resists simplicity. A farmer complains about Roman grain quotas. A merchant boasts of Greek ancestry, eyeing tax exemptions reserved for privileged settlers. A priest mutters prayers to Sobek, the crocodile god, his temple crumbling under neglect while Roman villas rise nearby. It's disturbingly efficient and quietly heartbreaking. You pass a workshop where artisans paint yet another mummy portrait. The subject, young woman, her features sharp and proud, her jewelry distinctly Roman, but tucked behind her ear, a small lotus blossom. A quiet rebellion. The Fayum isn't just fertile ground for crops, it's fertile ground for confusion, for identity crises, for a strange, unsettling collision of worlds. And as the sun dips, behind the palm groves, casting long shadows across the grain fields, you realize Rome may govern Egypt, but no decree, no census, no portrait can tame the messy, beautiful, deeply disturbing collision of old and new. The canals of Fayum narrow behind you as your little boat slips back onto the Nile, its waters gleaming like black silk beneath the rising moon. You've traced temples and tombs, followed rebels and bureaucrats, watched emperors pretend to be gods, but tonight, you drift toward something far more mundane, and somehow, more disturbing. A Roman bathhouse. That sounds harmless, right? Clean, civilized, a little oasis of comfort in the desert. But this isn't some marble marvel tucked into Rome's heart. This is a bathhouse awkwardly plunked down on Egyptian soil, a foreign implant with steaming pools, polished floors, and a faint, unsettling stink of imperial arrogance. You disembark in Antinopolis, a Roman planned city sprawling along the Nile's eastern bank, named for Antinous, the Emperor Hadrian's beloved companion, drowned or sacrificed, depending who you ask. In these very waters, the city stands like a Roman mirage, wide streets, gleaming statues, and yes, bathhouse. The bathhouse squats near the forum, its brickwork oddly red against the pale Egyptian stone. You step inside, and immediately the air thickens, steam curling from the caldarium, voices echoing off the vaulted ceilings, the soft slap of sandals on damp tile that it feels off. Naked Roman officials lounge on benches, their bronzed bodies gleaming with oil. Egyptian workers scrub the floors, their eyes low, their shoulders tense. The walls are painted with Greek myths, Apollo, Hercules gods, who feel misplaced beneath the desert sun. You drift through the tepidarium, the lukewarm central room, as to merchants argue in rapid Greek, something about grain prices, harvest, projections, the usual. In the corner, a Roman centurion soaks in a tub, barking orders at a scribe, hovering nearby with a wax tablet. It's disturbingly mundane. Historians still argue how deeply Roman social habits like this penetrated Egyptian society. Some claim bathhouses became little melting pots, blending cultures. Others insist they remained exclusive spaces foreign bubbles, awkwardly dropped into an ancient land. You watch as a pair of Egyptian youths scrub themselves in a side room, their tunics faded, their eyes darting nervously toward the wealthier patrons. Do they feel included or invaded? A mosaic beneath your feet depicts dolphins leaping through stylized waves. You imagine the artist, toiling beneath Rome's banners, carving Mediterranean fantasies into Egyptian floors. Thousands of miles from home, the bathhouse hums with quiet contradictions. Clean Roman engineering meets the gritty, humid Nile. Social status floats in the steam as clearly as the scent of olive oil and sweat. Out there, Egyptians trudge under heavy taxes and harvest quotas. In here, Roman citizens relax. Privilege soaks. The empire peacocks. Even the walls seem to snicker at the awkward fusion. Lotus flowers twined beside laurel wreaths. Egyptian ankh symbols peek from beneath sloppy layers of plaster. A half-finished mural awkwardly merges Isis with Venus. You linger in the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool, as sharp whispers fill the room. Rumor stacks protests a priver, temple unrest, a provincial official caught skimming grain shipments. Even in this marble sanctuary, Egypt's unrest creeps through the cracks. You slip back onto the street, the cool night air biting after the heavy, humid bathhouse. Antinopolis stretches wide and clean under the stars, every avenue aligned like a Roman chessboard imposed on Egyptian sand. And yet, the Nile keeps flowing, the old gods keep watching, the empire keeps pretending, and you can't help but think, as the city fades behind you, that no amount of heated baths or tiled mosaics can wash away the unease lurking beneath. Rome's shiny surface dot the tidy avenues of Antinopolis fall away behind you as your boat glides downstream once more, slipping past moonlit fields and ancient, leaning date palms. The Nile, stubborn and eternal, hums beneath you. But tonight, you're not chasing temples or tax collectors. You're drifting straight into one of Egypt's strangest love stories. And, naturally, it's disturbingly political. You pass villages sleeping under the stars, reed huts tucked between dark green crops. But ahead, rising like a pale marble ghost, is the small temple complex dedicated not to a god, but to a boy. A dead boy. Antinous. The lover of Emperor Hadrian. His drowning in the Nile sent shockwaves rippling from Alexandria to Rome, from imperial palaces to peasant shacks. Some called it an accident. Others whispered of sacrifice, a gift to the gods, an attempt to cheat fate. Historians still argue about the truth. Some say Antinous slipped and fell during a river ceremony. Others suspect ritual death, designed to secure divine favor or manipulate omens. Either way, the aftermath, pure, unsettling imperial spectacle. Hadrian declared the boy a god. Statues of Antinous, young and eternally beautiful, sprang up from Egypt to Athens to distant Roman cities. His curly-haired, idealized face appeared on coins. Temples were built in Hishanau. His image nestled awkwardly among ancient deities as a freshly minted god of youth, beauty, and tragic loss. But here, in Egypt, it hits differently. You wander the small temple grounds. Papyrus rustles along the water's edge. Lotus flowers float, ghostly and pale, across dark pools. Carved reliefs show Antinous side by side with Egyptian gods Osiris, Anubis, as if the Nile itself welcomed him into the underworld's tangled pantheon. The locals, predictably, had mixed feelings. Some embraced the spectacle. Another god meant more festivals, offerings, attention. Egypt had always blended gods like spices in a stew, but others saw it as a disturbing foreign intrusion. A boy elevated to divine status by imperial decree, his face plastered on temple walls like an awkward tourist brochure. You run your fingers along the smooth stone of a statue. Antinous stares back, his eyes marble perfect, his expression frozen in youthful melancholy. The cult of Antinous became wildly popular, especially among the empire's Greek and Egyptian elites, desperate to curry imperial favor. Shrines appeared, processions filled the streets. Priests, never ones to miss a political opportunity, folded the boy's myth into existing Nile lore. But beneath the flowers and incense, it felt off. The real Antinous was gone, swallowed by the same Nile. You drift on now. What remained? A god-shaped puppet, a symbol, a disturbingly convenient fusion of love, loss, and propaganda. As the temple quiets, the Nile gurgling softly in the background, you can't help but marvel at Rome's twisted genius. They didn't just conquer Egypt's land, they colonized its grief, its rituals, even its gods. The lotus blossoms drift beside your boat as you push off once more. The stars wheel overhead. Somewhere, Hadrian mourns his lover. Somewhere else, coins are minted with Antinous's perfect, tragic face, and Egypt, practical as always, folds the whole mess into its ancient rhythms. The soft ripples of the Nile whisper beneath your boat as you drift away from Antinous's marble-faced ghost, his temple receding into the reeds like a half-remembered dream. The stars reflect on the water in trembling silver trails, and for a moment, the empire feels distant, but it never stays distant for long. Ahead, on the western bank, rises another eerie monument to Rome's uneasy grip on Egypt. Not a temple, not a palace, but a quarry. A yawning skeletal scar carved into the cliffs near Aswan. You step onto the dusty shore, the scent of hot stone and iron tools thick in the dry night air. The granite quarries of Aswan have fed Egyptian monuments for millennia, temples, obelisks, colossal statues, but now, the empire feeds here too, and it's disturbingly relentless. By torchlight, workers chip away at massive blocks of pink granite, their tools clinking against the rock like a funeral bell for Egypt's autonomy. Roman overseers pace nearby, their sandals crunching over shattered stone. Piles of half-shaped columns and chunks of unfinished statuary lie scattered like fallen giants. See, Rome loves to borrow grandeur, and nothing says power like an Egyptian obelisk plonked down in a Roman forum. Historians still argue how much of Egypt's architectural heritage was repurposed versus outright plundered. Some say it was cultural exchange, imperial pride, dressed in exotic stone. Others call it theft, plain and simple. You trail behind a labor gang hauling ropes across the quarry floor. The skeleton of a colossal obelisk lies on its side, cracked midway through carving. The unfinished obelisk, as it's known, a 1,000-ton monster that never made its journey north. But hundreds of others did. From here, granite blocks traveled by barge down the Nile, destined for Alexandria, for Rome itself. Egyptian monuments uprooted, reshaped, paraded as trophies of conquest. The eerie part, Egypt's artisans still do the work. Their hands carve the lotus petals, their chisels shape the hieroglyphs, but the glory, the credit, that sails straight to the emperor's doorstep. You run your hand along the cool, rough flank of the unfinished obelisk. Its sheer size dwarfs you, a testament to ambition, to engineering, and to hubris. Nearby, a Roman engineer gestures to plans unfurled on a slab of granite. Latin scribbles mingle with Egyptian diagrams. The two worlds overlap awkwardly, just like everything else in this land of gods and emperors. You overhear a frustrated supervisor barking orders. The latest shipment's delayed. Nile levels are low. The harvest's thin. The empire demands its monuments, but the river patient, powerful, ancient refuses to rush. The workers chip away, their faces shadowed, their eyes downcast. They know this quarry fed pharaohs long before Rome, and it'll likely outlast them too. You climb a low ridge overlooking the quarry. The granite gleams under the stars like a graveyard of unfinished power. Half-carved statues, abandoned columns, silent echoes of ambition. Rome may carve its name into stone, drag obelisks across oceans, stamp its authority onto monuments, but beneath the chisels and crowbars, Egypt endures, quiet, patient, unyielding as granite. The empire takes, Egypt waits, and the river keeps flowing. The quarry's raw edges fade into the shadows as your boat slips silently back onto the Nile, its inky surface reflecting slivers of starlight like shattered glass. The steady rhythm of the current pulls you north again, but the granite's quiet warnings still echo in your ears. Stone, after all, remembers. But tonight, you drift not toward temples or tombs, but toward the empire's most stubborn, unsettling project, turning Alexandria into a Roman city. You arrive just as the first pale wash of dawn breaks across the horizon, outlining the city's jagged silhouette. Alexandria, the glittering port, the jewel of the Mediterranean, the stubborn, chaotic mashup of Egyptian tradition and Greek ambition, and now, Roman arrogance, painted fresh over the top. The harbor bustles with early trade sailors unloading amphorae of olive oil, merchants haggling over sacks of Egyptian grain destined for Roman tables. But it's not the trade that draws your eye, it's the skyline. Columns rise where they never used to. Statues of emperors glare down from marble plinths. Latin inscriptions creep across faded Greek facades. The city feels like it's wearing an ill-fitting Roman costume, tailored hastily, seams splitting in the desert heat. You step off the boat and blend into the busy streets. The famed Canopic Way stretches wide ahead, lined with colonnades and vendors hawking everything from honeyed dates to cheap imported wine. Roman guards patrol with polished armor and stiff posture, but their eyes dart, wary beneath the bravado. Because Alexandria doesn't tame easily. Historians still debate how thoroughly Rome ever controlled this city. Some point to the grand public works, the amphitheater, the Roman baths, the new temples as proof of assimilation. Others cite the riots, the whispered resistance, the stubborn Greek and Egyptian undercurrents that refused to kneel. You duck into a side alley, away from the postcard facades, and the mask slips entirely. The old city breathes hieroglyphy, scrawled in Demotic beside Latin edicts, half-collapsed shrines to Isis and Serapis, stubbornly wedged between Roman apartments. A group of scholars argues over a faded papyrus outside a weather-beaten shop. One gestures angrily in Greek, another retorts in accented Latin. Overhead, a tattered Roman eagle banner flutters beside an ancient symbol of the Egyptian Ankh. It's disturbingly honest, a city fraying at the edges, stitched together by imperial ambition and old-world defiance. You wander past the Serapeum, what's left of it, once the grandest temple in Alexandria, now a battered, uneasy monument to change. Columns lean, statues are defaced, imperial soldiers loiter nearby, their presence more unsettling than reassuring. Locals pass quickly, eyes down, lips pressed tight. You've heard the stories, riots between Greeks, Egyptians, and Romans, temples burned, intellectuals exiled. Even philosophers like Hypatia, centuries later, would fall victim to Alexandria's raw, dangerous energy. But for now, the city simmers. You linger at the harbor's edge, watching the Pharaohs lighthouse pierce the morning mist, its ancient brilliance enduring despite the empire's meddling. Grain barges creak as they're loaded. Roman officials tally exports with bureaucratic precision. The empire may stamp its mark, here on stone, on law, on maps, but Alexandria has always been a shape-shifter. And as your boat drifts away, the sun casting gold across the restless waves, you can't help but wonder, can Rome truly own a city that never truly belonged to anyone? The bustling docks of Alexandria dissolve into the mist behind you as your boat slips once again onto the wide, steady current of the Nile. The sun glows warm now, high above the reeds, but something colder hums beneath the surface of your journey. You've followed the empire through its temples, its taxes, its monuments, its love stories, but now, you're drifting straight into Egypt's strangest contradiction of all, where science and superstition collide. Wrapped in the crumbling scrolls of forgotten laboratories, you're headed toward the legacy of the Library of Alexandria, or at least, what's left of it. The great library is gone, scattered, reduced to little more than a ghostly silhouette in the world's imagination. No one quite agrees when it vanished. Some say Julius Caesar's siege torched it, others blame centuries of neglect, religious fervor, or quiet, paper-crumbling bureaucracy. Historians still argue about whether the famous library was ever a single building, or a sprawling network of collections scattered throughout the city. But one thing is certain, its spirit lingers. You weave through Alexandria's side streets, toward what remains a smaller, shabbier annex of the once mighty research halls. Inside, the air smells faintly of smoke and salt. Dusty scrolls sit bundled on wooden racks, and a few scholars still stubbornly sort through the fragments, piecing together the scattered bones of ancient knowledge. A Greek librarian waves you in, his fingers ink-stained, his eyes sharp despite the surrounding decay. He unrolls a brittle papyrus, its edge crumbling like a dry leaf. Philosophy, medicine, or perhaps you prefer magical recipes? He asks, his grin thin and wry. See, that's the strange thing about Roman Egypt. Science and magic were never enemies here. They were neighbors, cousins, sometimes indistinguishable. You skim through the scrolls, surgical diagrams alongside astrological charts, herbal remedies beside incantations to ward off crocodiles and fever. The boundary between knowledge and superstition. Paper-thin, one scroll describes cataract surgery, a procedure centuries ahead of its time. Another offers a recipe for summoning protective spirits using honey, incense, and crocodile fat. It's disturbingly practical. Historians still debate how much of this hybrid science trickled into Roman medicine. Some believe the Egyptians clung fiercely to their own methods, influencing imperial doctors in quiet ways. Others argue the Romans saw Egyptian medicine as a curiosity, exotic, but not superior. You watch a Roman officer consult with a local healer, his leg wrapped awkwardly from a training accident. He insists on a poultice blessed by Egyptian priests, not Roman physicians. Superstition. Maybe, or maybe he just trusts Egypt's older hands. You step outside as a merchant hawks amulets in the street, ash charms, scarabs, tiny figurines of Base, the dwarf god of protection. Some are bought by local farmers, some by Roman soldiers. Everyone, it seems, hedges their bets. A scribe passes by, muttering to himself as he balances scrolls under one arm. His bundle contains arithmetic tables, weather predictions, and a spell to protect grain shipments from evil winds. No one blinks. No one laughs. In Egypt, knowledge doesn't come with neat, modern labels. You can feel the city breathing around you, gritty, stubborn, layered. Alexandria's grand monuments and imperial boulevards try to shout, but it's the scribbles in the margins, the half-forgotten spells, the street corner healers who whisper the louder truth. Rome governs, Rome taxes, Rome drills and documents, and builds. But Egypt remembers that not everything must be rational. Not everything bends to census scrolls and marble logic. And maybe that's the most disturbing part of all, because beneath the empire's shiny surface, you find something Rome can't quite stamp out. A quiet, ink-stained rebellion of curiosity, of ghosts, of messy, beautiful, untidy human belief. You slipped from Alexandria's labyrinth of knowledge and contradictions, following the Nile south. Once more, as the sun arcs across the wide Egyptian sky, the river unfurls before you, steady, ancient, unchanged by the petty shuffling of emperors and scholars. But tonight, your journey steers away from cities and temples. You're headed deep into the desert, into the burning, breathless silence where Rome's control thins, and something much older waits. The oases. You dock near the Nile's edge and join a small caravan winding west into the sand. Camels groan, packs creak. The wind hisses through dry reeds as you leave the river behind, the greenery shrinking into a thin, wavering line. Hours pass. The sky stretches wide and ruthless. Sand crunches underfoot, and then, like a mirage stitched into the horizon, it appears. Karga Oasis, a splash of improbable green framed by red cliffs and endless dunes. It's disturbingly isolated, but don't let the palm trees and sleepy wells fool you. This oasis isn't untouched. Rome reached here too. You pass through the battered ruins of Casa el Guaita, a crumbling Roman temple awkwardly planted in the sand. The sandstone walls bear faded reliefs of Egyptian gods, but Latin graffiti creeps along the base like ivy. The empire leaves its mark, even at the world's edges. Inside, the temple's quiet. The air hums with heat. A broken statue of Amen leans drunkenly against a wall, its face chipped away. Outside, Roman watchtowers squat along the caravan route, their silhouettes sharp against the dunes. Historians still argue how much Rome truly controlled the desert routes. Some say they fortified the oases, guarding trade and taxing merchants. Others insist the empire's grip was loose, more theater than reality. But the locals, they know. You linger at a well as desert traders swap news, bandits prowling beyond the cliffs, temple priests charging for protection, a Roman patrol gone missing, their bones bleached clean by sun and sand. It's disturbingly clear. The empire may map the land, build roads, erect temples, but out here the desert decides. You join a small group headed deeper west to Oasis. The journey is punishing. Sandstorms whip the horizon. The sun hangs like molten metal in the sky. But at night, The stars blaze in quiet defiance. The dunes roll endlessly, swallowing Roman milestones, old caravan bones, forgotten gods. At Dakla, you find more awkward imperial fingerprints, a battered fort, a temple dedicated to obscure deities absorbed into the Roman pantheon, villas built for Roman officials long since abandoned to sand and silence. But beneath it all, Egypt endures. The well water tastes the same. The old songs drift across the dunes. Amulets jingle on traders' neck, scarabs, ankhs, quiet prayers, disguised as jewelry. Rome came here, with its maps and taxes and marble-faced officials. But the desert isn't impressed. And as you stare across the rolling moonlit dunes, you realize no empire, no matter how organized, how arrogant, how wide its roads stretch, can ever truly conquer the sand. It waits, it swallows, it remembers, and out here, beyond the Nile's reach, Egypt belongs only to itself. The desert's quiet weight presses against your back as your caravan snakes east, returning to the Nile's gentle embrace. You feel the silence of the dunes clinging to you like fine dust, even as the familiar ripple of water reappears on the horizon. But as you float south along the Nile's steady current once more, the wind shifts, and with it comes the unsettling scent of empire in decay. Ahead lies Elephantine Island, an ancient granite outcrop nestled in the Nile. Once a borderland, a sanctuary, a crossroads, and now a disturbingly honest reminder that even Rome's vast machinery creaks and falters here at Egypt's southern edge. You glide ashore beneath swaying date palms. Elephantine rises ahead, low stone ruins crumbling into the sand. Old temples stripped of color, their gods peering down with chipped, indifferent eyes. It wasn't always this way. Once Elephantine marked Egypt's vital frontier with Nubia, land of gold, of soldiers, of uneasy alliances. Pharaohs built temples here. Traders exchanged ivory, incense, and whispered rumors beneath its granite shadows. But now, the empire barely holds the edges together. You wander through the skeletal ruins of the Temple of Khnum, once vibrant, now faded beneath the desert sun. A Roman garrison squats nearby, their camp thrown together with more haste than pride. Their uniforms hang loose, their eyes are sharp, suspicious. The Nile patrols run thin these days. The empire stretches wide, to widen its fringes sag under the weight of rebellion, banditry, and good old-fashioned exhaustion. Historians still argue whether Rome ever truly controlled Nubia beyond Elephantine. Some claim the empire secured peace through trade and diplomacy. Others insist the frontier was little more than a polite lie, a thin imperial curtain billowing in the desert wind. You follow a narrow track down to the river's edge. Nubian traders pole sleek boats across the current, their dark sails fluttering. Like quiet defiance, gold gleams faintly in the baskets they carry. Tribute, maybe, or bribes, or just the price of Rome pretending to be in charge. The locals speak of Kushite kings beyond the border, of fortresses hidden among the cliffs, of Roman patrols disappearing into the dunes, never to return. The empire builds roads. The desert swallows them. It's a familiar pattern now. You pause at a faded inscription carved into the granite, a Roman governor's name, chipped and half buried by time. The letters boast of conquest, of strength, of eternal rule. But the sand laughs softly around your feet. You climb a rocky outcrop and stare south. Beyond the palm groves, the Nile narrows, winding toward a hazy, rebellious horizon. Nubia waits beyond, its hills shimmering with heat, its alliances brittle, its independence stubborn. Elephantine is supposed to be a line in the sand, a border Rome draws with granite and ego. But as the wind hums through crumbling temples and the Nile flows undeterred, you realize borders are only real on maps. The river doesn't care, neither does the desert, and the empire. The empire forgets that the edges always fray first. The winds off the Nile brush cool against your face as you leave Elephantine behind, drifting north once more along Egypt's ancient artery. The granite cliffs and quiet, rebellious borderlands fade behind you, but the unease, it lingers. And now, the empire's most disturbing trick lies ahead. Not soldiers, not temples, not even taxes. Tonight, you float straight into Rome's greatest illusion, peace. Pax Romana they call it. The Roman peace, an empire-wide hush, a golden age, a lull in the chaos of history. But as you dock in Middle Egypt, beneath the watchful cliffs of Beni Hassel, you'll see how paper-thin that piece truly is. The tombs loom overhead, carved high into the limestone cliffs like ancient scars. Their faded paintings tell stories of noble families, harvests, and quiet rituals. But below, the villages hum with something far less serene. You step into the dusty lanes of a small settlement where the empire's promises have frayed at the edges. Farmers stoop beneath heavy grain sacks, destined for Rome's endless appetite. Children chase stray goats through alleys. A Roman tax official counts bundles of barley, his lips thin, his eyes calculating. It feels peaceful, but only on the surface. The locals whisper of grain shortages, of overworked fields, of bandits lurking along caravan routes. You pass a wall scrawled with crude graffiti, an emperor's name twisted into an insult. Scratched hastily and half-erased. Historians still debate whether Pax Romana truly existed here, or if it was just clever propaganda, Roman lullaby sung loud enough to drown out the grumbles and cracks. Some argue Egypt thrived under Rome, its temples restored, its trade routes protected. Others point to simmering resentment, quiet rebellions, and an economy milked dry for the empire's benefit. You duck into a small tavern where farmers mutter over clay cups of sour wine. Their talk is subdued, but their faces say more than their words. The last harvest barely met the tax quota. A shipment of grain bound for Rome spoiled en route. The temple priests grumble, their festivals shrinking, their gods forgotten by imperial decree. You can almost hear the cracks forming. Outside, Roman patrol passes, leather sandals, sharp against the stone, swords glinting at their hips. Their presence is supposed to reassure. Instead, it underscores the quiet truth. Peace enforced by steel isn't peace at all. The village children stare wide-eyed at the soldiers, their games momentarily forgotten. You wonder what they'll inherit, a land smoothed into submission, or one that finally snaps. You climb a worn path toward the cliffs. Inside one of the tombs, the painted walls flicker beneath your torchlight. Faded hunting scenes, harvests, boats drifting lazily along a more innocent Nile. The art belongs to an older Egypt, one untouched by Roman ambition. The empire carved its name into stone, its taxes into ledgers, its legions into sand. But this painted, fragile past, it lingers like a quiet accusation. As you stand among the tombs, the wind carrying the faint scent of grain, dust and incense, you realize Pax Romana may stretch its banners across oceans, but in Egypt, peace is a story sold to foreigners. The land remembers differently, and beneath every quiet street, every taxed field, every uneasy temple, the old Egypt waits. The tombs of Beni Hazen shrank behind you as the Nile pulls you steadily north, its wide black ribbon winding through the twilight. The river hums low and patient beneath your boat, but ahead, the night tightens, the air prickles faintly. You're drifting toward Egypt's most unsettling inheritance of all, the dead, and not just the rapt. Carefully embalmed ancestors sleeping beneath temple floors, or tucked into painted tombs. No, tonight you float toward the villages of the necropolis workers, the people who made death their trade. Deir el-Medina. It lies tucked into the cliffs west of Thebes, a small, walled village hidden among the rocks and sand. But don't let its size fool you. Here for centuries, Egypt's most skilled artisans carved eternity into stone tomb builders, painters, sculptors, men who etched Pharaohs' afterlives into the earth. And under Roman rule, the dead still need houses. The work never stops. You step through the narrow gate as torches flicker along the cramped alleys. Mud-brick homes lean together like conspirators. The smell of dust, oil, and faint incense lingers in the cool night. Ere it feels intimate and disturbingly insular. These aren't city elites or pampered priests. These are craftsmen, their hands rough with their eyes sharp from years tracing the fine lines of hieroglyphs by lamplight. Historians still argue how independent Deir el-Medina truly was under Rome. Some say the village functioned much as it always had, its workers respected, its traditions preserved in the empire's blind spot. Others suspect quiet surveillance, subtle taxes, and cultural erosion creeping in from the edges. You follow a group of workers headed to a nearby tomb project. Even now, the Valley of the Kings hides fresh construction private tombs for wealthy Romans craving an Egyptian afterlife, officials eager to wrap themselves in Pharaoh's glory. The cliffs loom high above, riddled with doorways carved into stone, each one a portal for a soul, or a bribe. or a carefully negotiated legacy. You pause at a freshly painted tomb wall. Greek letters mingle awkwardly with Egyptian script. The gods share space: Osiris beside Apollo, Anubis alongside Jupiter. It's disturbingly crowded. The artisans work quietly, but their eyes speak volumes. Rome may fund these tombs, commission these paintings, but the spirit of the work, it belongs to Egypt, always has. A young apprentice guides you through the villages, temples, mall, humble, its worn walls flickering with ancient prayers. Offerings sit on chipped altars. The old gods linger in the shadows, patient, unimpressed by Latin titles and marble statues. Outside, Roman tax collector posts a notice. New levies on funerary goods, increased costs for burial plots. The villagers read it in silence, their expressions tight. Even the business of death isn't safe from the empire's greed. But Deir el-Medina endures. Its homes, its workshops, its secretive alleys, they hum with stubborn, careful resistance. Here, artisans preserve more than Pharaohs' afterlives. They preserve Egypt itself. The empire may commission tombs. It may inflate prices, rename gods, sprinkle Latin into funerary prayers. But in the hands of these craftsmen, the old ways carve themselves deep into the limestone, quiet and undisturbed. As the stars burn cold above the cliffs, you realize Rome may govern the land of the living, but Egypt keeps the dead. And that's a kind of power even emperors should fear. The night deepens as you drift away from Deir el-Medina, its quiet alleys and stubborn artisans swallowed by the cliffs once more. The Nile spreads wide and black beneath the stars, the desert cool creeping in like a slow exhale. But your journey isn't finished yet. Ahead lies the most disturbing contradiction of Roman Egypt. Not temples, not taxes, not tombs, but faith. Raw, tangled, dangerously alive. You're headed toward an early Christian community, a quiet gathering huddled in the shadows of the empire, whispering prayers Rome can't yet control. It starts smaller, flickering oil lamp behind a shuttered door in a dusty Theban neighborhood. You slip inside. The room is bare, simple. A faint scent of bread and smoke clings to the cracked plaster walls. A handful of men and women sit cross-legged on woven mats, their voices low, their eyes wary. They're Egyptian, Greek, Nubian. A Roman merchant's widow leans against the far wall, her fingers worrying a wooden cross hidden beneath her cloak. It's disturbingly fragile. The words they speak are in Greek fragments of scripture carried across the empire by stubborn travelers. A new religion, still young, still whispered, but already Rome feels its edges fray. Historians still argue when and how Christianity took root here. Some say Alexandria's scholars imported it first. Others point to traveling merchants or soldiers bringing the faith upriver. But by now, even in small Nile-side villages, the message spreads. You listen to their prayers. They speak of one God, not many, of peace, of defiance, of life beyond the emperor's statues and tax scrolls. It's unsettling. These aren't priests with temple incense or scribes copying hymns to Isis. These are farmers, traders, artisans, ordinary souls, threading quiet rebellion through faith. A baby fusses in the corner. An elder woman soothes him, her lullaby drifting seamlessly from ancient Egyptian melodies into a whispered psalm. The blending of worlds feels eerily natural, but it isn't safe. You hear them speak in cautious tones about recent arrests, a Roman official growing suspicious, a temple priest denouncing the foreign cult. You feel the fear in the room, thin, brittle, but laced with quiet resolve. Outside, the empire parades its gods in marble and bronze. Inside, in plain rooms like this, something softer stirs, something Rome can't tax, conscript, or carve onto stone. A young man offers you a cup of wine. It's rough, bitter, homemade, but shared without hesitation. You recognize the gesture, hospitality older than any empire. The night deepens, the group disperses, candles are snuffed. The house falls silent as you slip back onto the street. The stars glint like chipped obsidian above the Nile. Rome rules Egypt, on paper, on coins, on crumbling temple walls. But beneath, in quiet rooms, in whispered songs, in stubborn hearts, the land changes, faith changes, and the empire, it doesn't notice. Not yet, but you do. The quiet house fades behind you as you make your way back to the Nile, the cool wind curling off the water like a sigh from the sleeping land. The stars scatter across the black sky, and for a fleeting moment, Egypt feels untouched. But it never is. Your final stretch down the river brings you full circle, not to temples or tombs, but to the oldest, strangest, most disturbingly persistent illusion of all, that empires last. Ahead, looming out of the haze like a fallen star, is Alexandria, once more, but this time you bypass the bustling harbor, the marble plazas, the thin veneer of Roman control. You drift instead toward the canopic branch of the Nile, where reeds choke the river's edges and forgotten villas crumble quietly into the mud. This is where the empire's arrogance begins to sink. Literally, you climb ashore near what was once Canopus, glittering seaside town famed for its temples, its debauchery, its gods worshipped with wine-soaked sandal-slapping parties. But now, Canopus is half swallowed by the sea. You walk among toppled columns, their marble faces slick with salt. Seaweed clings to statues of Roman emperors, their chipped noses pointing accusingly at the sky. The earth sinks, the coastline shifts, and the empire's carefully drawn maps dissolve like paper in water. Historians still argue why Canopus and parts of Alexandria's eastern suburbs slipped beneath the waves. Some blame earthquakes, others gradual subsidence, rising seas, or forgotten canals collapsing beneath their own ambition. But the result, disturbingly poetic. The empire came, carved its name into stone, strutted along the shores of the Niland. The earth shrugged, the sea crept in, the marble sank. You wade among the ruins, the water cooled around your ankles. Broken statues lie, half submerged, their Roman features smoothed by tide and time. Lotus blossoms drift lazily between sunken doorways. Fish dart through temple columns, their tiny scales flashing like coins lost to the ages. Divers have found pieces of it all down. There, fragments of Cleopatra's palace, Roman bathhouses, Egyptian temples awkwardly married to imperial architectural, dissolved into the Mediterranean's blue embrace. And yet, as you look back at the Nile, winding inland through patient fields and quiet villages, it hits you. The empire was never the foundation. The river was. The land was. Rome borrowed Egypt's beauty, its labor, its gods. It built its statues, printed its coins, issued its edicts, but it couldn't rewrite the current. The Nile flows, undisturbed. The desert waits, unchanged. The dead sleep beneath both, stubborn and still. And the empire sinks. You linger among the reeds as the sky pales toward dawn. Your reflection, rippling beside forgotten ruins. The marble will crumble, the temples will sink, the empire will fade, its proud banners tattered into myth. But Egypt doesn't care. Egypt endures. The land watches. The Nile flows. The old gods smile faintly beneath the waves, and as the first golden light creeps across the water, you realize, for all its disturbing ambition, its borrowed grandeur, its fragile peace, Rome was never in charge here. Not really. Egypt belongs only to itself. The Nile glides quietly beside you now, the restless empire fading behind soft ripples and misty dawn. The sky melts from deep indigo to soft gray, and with it, the edges of history blur and soften. You've drifted through temples and tombs, beneath broken columns and lost statues, beside stubborn fields and whispered prayers. You've seen emperors try to carve their names into stone, onto gods, into the stars themselves. But now the Nile hushes you, steady as a heartbeat. The empire's ambitions feel smaller in this gentle light. The coins, the taxes, just dust settling on a land that's always known how to wait. You listen to the faint hum of water against your boat. The reeds sway. Birds stir in the papyrus thickets, their cries low and sleepy. Far beyond the cliffs, the desert breathes its quiet, ancient breath, untouched by marble or maps. The old stories fade into the shadows now. The forgotten gods close their painted eyes. Even the restless echoes of Roman ambition finally